We are so blessed to be in just an incredible church. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Schlesman. I'm lead pastor here at West End Assembly of God. And I tell you, we have an incredible opportunity to serve our city this week. And not just, not a lot of people that you invite. Anybody ever invite somebody to church and they didn't come? Anybody raise your hand? Raise your hand if you ever invited somebody to church, they didn't come, okay? If somebody came with you, don't raise your hand if they're next to you, by the way. But they didn't come probably for a few times. I want to take the church. How about we go to them this week? I'm inviting you to go to them. Let's go together and lift up our city this week. We want you to join us Monday through Friday from 9 to 4 and Saturday from 9 to 1. We will be serving our city. Monday and Tuesday, tomorrow and Tuesday, we'll be at Quioccasin Middle. Reaching out, connecting with a local middle school and helping them out in ways that will say, we want to come to you. Wednesday through Saturday, we'll be at Belmead Park and really in downtown, connecting with people and really loving on them in ways of serving them that they may not even think to do for themselves or capable of doing themselves. And we're going to have so much fun doing it. You know why? I love our My Story. Give it up for Matt Stanton for sharing his story. Matt couldn't even put it completely into words, but what he was experiencing when he got down on his knees and washed that little girl's feet and served that person outside of himself, what he was experiencing was a connection with God, because when you serve, you connect with who God is. And so I want to ask you to connect with us in a profound way and lift up our VA. You can pick a day or a few days. I hope you'll join our staff and join our leadership team as we serve with you. We're really looking forward to that. As I've said, as a church, if you're just joining us online, we've been in a series called Broken and Beautiful. And we've been looking at the difficult places in life, the broken places in life. And if you're new to this place, you've come into a church family that really believes in talking about real issues. And we're one of those families that talk about stuff, and they're not easy things. And today, I want to talk to you about a very difficult topic. One that impacts all of us. In fact, if it doesn't impact you personally, you know someone who it does, and because you know them, it does impact you. And that is the topic and the brokenness of addiction. You say, well, I don't know much about that, and that's okay. You showed up at the right place. Or maybe you know someone, you've never understood it. You can't understand the roller coaster that on. And most of us have said, I'll pass, I'm done, I cannot do it anymore. Maybe you're supporting a loved one. By the way, I can't answer all of the questions about addiction tonight, but I'm inviting you to a workshop to dive deeper with Dr. Dave DeMasters, our pastoral counselor on staff, who's going to take us deeper tomorrow night. And especially for those of us who have family members or friends that you are attempting to help with this issue. Because let me tell you, you've probably, like me, hit the eject button about 20,000 times, and you don't know what to do. You are exhausted trying to help them, and you're not sure how to do it. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And we want to just kind of be a support group for one another and come together tomorrow night, 7 o'clock in the Seek Room, and learn. Because you know what? There are some difficult things to talk about, like what do you do with boundaries? I mean, do you just go down the rabbit hole as far as it goes and you never stop? Where do you stop and they begin, and vice versa? We're going to talk about issues like that. We're going to talk about how to be a family and what happens when it's disrupted your whole family. How do you help someone? How do you come along? And whether you're going through that yourself or you're helping someone, I hope you'll continue to join us. I can't answer all of the questions today, but my passage this morning comes from a place that is actually, I was reminded yesterday I don't know if any of you got to go downtown yesterday to the boulevard that is now the Arthur Ashe Boulevard. That's pretty awesome, yeah. He's not just a hero in Richmond. He's a hero across the country. I'm so thankful to LaShonda Pace who invited me, and because if I could go on there, but I got the special VIP seats. You know what I'm saying? So that was a little more attractive to sit in the white chairs, with a back to them. Actually, that was great but I was reminded yesterday about Arthur Ashe and his legacy, because Arthur Ashe really embodies the vision of this church, whether you know that or not. Because our vision statement is this: to expand the family of God across all cultures and all generations. And Arthur Ashe lived that. In fact, if you go to his monument, you will see our text for this morning. So I thought it was pretty cool. As I sat there and I heard that, I was reminded, I didn't remember that this was the text actually on his monument, the text that I want us to look at today, found in Hebrews chapter 12. It says this: therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. You cannot go through this life. You cannot go through this life without experiencing entanglement. You can't do it. If you are living in this world, there are things that happen. In fact, the author of Hebrews assumed that you would be entangled. Do you know how we know that? Just read it. Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off. Not let us prepare. If it happens, maybe it'll happen. Let every single one of us throw off any sin that entangles us in this world. In this world, you will be entangled. So what do? The Apostle Paul put it this way to the letter he wrote to the church at Corinth, who was experiencing a lot of addiction in their cult community and in their culture. He said, I have the right to do anything, 1 Corinthians 6:12. You say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be what? Mastered. I will not be what? By anything. So what does it look like to not be mastered by anything? I want to look at two practical things for us to talk about today from God's Word. And the first one is this: we need a new fix. We need a new fix. So, Dr. Pam Peake, who's a nutritionist, a famous author of many fitness and health books, really talks about this idea of fulfilling and surviving, filling survival voids with what she calls false fixes. False fixes can be anything. So before you think, I'm not addicted, false fixes can be food. Your friends come out late at night, Ben and Jerry, and they comfort you. They call from the freezer. Come. When you taste the sugar, you will always thirst for me again. Do you know the average American consumes 160 pounds of sugar per year? And that sugar is actually more addictive than cocaine itself. In fact, if you look at an image of a brain addicted to cocaine and an image addicted to sugar, you will see exactly the same image. So before we say, hey, I don't have to do false fixes, I don't know, that's me, well, take a listen to some of the things that we're struggling with as a culture. I brought some statistics with me. You know how I like statistics. We're going to go through some of those. Over 20 million Americans over the age of 12 have an addiction. This excludes tobacco, by the way. Tobacco causes more deaths each year than all other substance abuse-related deaths combined. 1 in 8 American adults, that's 12.7% of our population, meets the criteria for an alcoholic, yet 95% of them don't think they have a problem. You ever know someone like that? If you don't, it could be you. But anyway, because 95%, I'm just saying, I'm good. Over 90% of those with an addiction begin drinking or smoking or using illicit drugs before the age of 18. They start young. 6 million adults and 500,000 teens have a gambling addiction. The average American household carries more than $15,000 in credit card debt. And now they got ways for it to pop up on your feed. If you even look at a website, I'm afraid to go to a website to buy something because it's going to show up on my feed every single day. And I'm going to be convinced by the end of my social media surfing that I have to have this. So 34.9% of adults and 17% of American children are obese, though. The average American household views 8.5 hours of TV a day. The average smartphone user checks their device 47 times a day. That's over 17,000 times a year. 13% of high school girls and 17% of high school boys spend more than 20 hours a week on the internet. 40 million American people regularly visit porn sites. 41% of people who play online video games admitted that they played computer games as an escape from the real world. Students addicted to video games have lower academic grades than their non-addicted peers. Over 240 million Americans check Facebook daily. That's 74% of all Americans. Out of 2.6 million people who tried marijuana for the first time, over half were under the age of 18. Marijuana had the highest rates of dependence out of an illicit substance in 2011, and 20.5 million Americans 12 or older abuse opioids. Prescription painkillers have killed more than 500,000 people. That's more than World War II, Korea, and Vietnam wars combined. These are broken places in our culture. And you may not like some of the things I put on that list because you may disagree. You say, well, that's not an addiction. Because we tend to define an addiction as something horrible or horrific that has not just addicted me, but that has broken everything in life. Because that's when an alcoholic finally says they're an alcoholic. When everyone around them knows it, and everyone knows it, and everyone has left them because of it, and then they say, maybe I have a problem. Because we have to have total destruction in our lives before we say, I'm dependent on something, I'm connected to something, because the real issue of addiction is fixation and somehow false fixes that God designed you to have in another way. We need a new fix. Listen to Hebrews chapter 12 going on. At the end of verse 1, it says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. See, the problem is that we've traded eternal fixation for the temporal fixation. That's really what we've discovered. Because that's tangible. That gives me an immediate feedback. Prayer doesn't always give me an immediate feedback. In fact, I don't get answers because we think prayer is about the answers anyway, so we miss the point. But anyway, that's another sermon for another time. I'll preach that some other day. But I'll tell you, we think that when we come to God, He doesn't give us the immediate feedback of social media for encouragement. He doesn't give us the immediate feedback of watching a few hours or binging something on television that makes me relax. He doesn't give me the immediate feedback of sugar. He doesn't give me the immediate feedback of caffeine. Don't you touch the caffeine, Pastor. There were plenty of stats about that, but I decided to leave them because I was afraid y'all leave. Plus, we served coffee, so then there was that. I left out bread because we got bagels out there and gluten. I left off all those stats. But all of us find comfort, and not just comfort, we find immediate comfort from something because we are looking for some kind of escape. We're looking for something to make us feel better. We are looking for comfort. We are looking for something to fill us because we are empty. And the more empty we are, the more we need it to fill us. The more desperate we are, the more immediate the filling needs to happen. And the more we get disconnected from God's original intent for us, the more we will become desperate and fixed, and we will have a fix, but it won't be God. And so you say, I don't struggle with this. Are you sure about that? What are you fixated on? See, the problem isn't just a drug. The problem is what we fix our eyes on. When we're fixated on comfort, then all kinds of things create comfort. When we're fixated on fun, there are so many things that need to have fun. We created fun and environments in our culture, and we just excuse them as saying, hey, it's no big deal, it's not a big deal. But the problem doesn't come from actually the drug itself. The problem comes from our direction and what we fixated on. We fixated on success, for instance. Let me show you how it works. So at work, I gain relationships, and in order to gain relationships, I must have great relationships in order to be successful, or I will not be valued in that company. So in order to get valued in that company, I reach out to relationships, and relationships become very important. And guess what they do? They hang out after work. Guess what's super important every single time they hang out? The most important topic of every single work hangout. Come on, people. The most important one. It's the one everyone talks about. If it's at your house, they're talking about what they're bringing to your house. If it's at a place, they're asking what they serve, what kind of beer they have, what kind of wine they have, what kind of alcohol they have. And you say, don't you touch that. Pastor, listen, I'm not telling you to decide. If you've already decided that you can drink as a believer, that's fine. You can do that with Jesus. Paul said, I have the ability to do a lot of things, but I will not be mastered by any. And if the number one topic every time we get together is what we're bringing to drink, then what are we fixated on? So it isn't about, when Jesus showed up at a party, well, Jesus knew how to party, y'all. Everyone who likes a little glass of wine every now and then, or a beer every now and then, can say, wow, yeah, Jesus knew how to do it. He went to the party. He turned water into wine. Yeah, but Jesus went to the party for a different reason. Jesus went to the party fixated on his Father, and whatever he saw the Father doing, that's what he did. So if God's calling you to those work relationships, he's not calling you for the alcohol. He's calling you for the relationships and the kingdom of God that he put in your heart, then hoping that maybe you'd show up with that. Yeah. We got to stop asking what we're bringing and start knowing in faith that every time I show up, you know what I'm bringing. I'm bringing the one who brought me to the party. I'm bringing the one who brought me into the family. We've been fixated on the wrong thing. We've traded eternal fixation of what he had originally, and the blessing that came from kingdom-minded and kingdom heart, we've traded it for something temporary, a false fix that only gives you a moment. It only gives you, now it makes everybody more tolerable, I can guarantee you that. I got to go to this work thing. Man, I hope there's something there. I don't want to have to get through this. Boy, I've got Thanksgiving at the in-laws this month. I got to make it through this Christmas party. Yeah, it makes it more tolerable. But I wonder if perhaps we're coming with the wrong reason. I wonder if we had the kind of purpose and we were fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, what would happen? We need a new fix. Number two, we need a new plan. Because the plan we have is not working. You know the definition of insanity, right? Keep doing the same thing, hoping for what? A different outcome, a different result. Okay, if you want to keep going insane, keep your plan. If you want to think, oh, no, I'm good, I'm okay, I don't even need to look at this, I got the things I like, I found a pill that works for me, I found a drink that works for me, I found a routine that works for me, I found a behavior that works for me, I found something that works for me, and I can still do Jesus. That's why I'm here today. And so we need a new plan. And so listen to what the author of Hebrews says. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Jesus, why are you so extreme? Because part of the plan would involve a clinical cut. Clinical cut. Matthew 18, verse 8, this is what it says. If your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. How extreme is that? I mean, that's a little overboard, don't you think? I mean, my hand causes some kind of problem and you want me to cut it off? Jesus, if your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. Whew. So Jesus said it's extreme, but while you're cutting it off, while you're blocking that behavior, while you're trying to change that, it wasn't just about changing it. Here's what the Apostle Paul said to the church at Ephesus. Because if you cut it off, that doesn't help. Paul knew that. Here's what he said. You were taught with regard to your former life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. The quick fix, the early thing, the thing that I need right now, the immediate gratification, that thing that I have to have right now, we've deceived ourselves that somehow this is going to help us. And Paul says, this is what's corrupted by its deceitful desires. Put off those old things to be made new in the attitudes of your minds, to renew. You know, it takes 21 days to renew an entire psychopathic pathway in your brain. It actually builds. You can watch it, and images of a brain, watch an entire new behavior begin. If you just stop one behavior, you will end up going back, guaranteed. This is why in church at Galatia, Paul said, stop being enslaved again. You have been set free from that. But why do you keep going back? This is why. Because we just cut it off. But we need to be made new in the attitude. We need to build new attitudes, new patterns, new behavior, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. We've been looking for a fix in the wrong place. We've been having a plan for the wrong thing. Our plan has a plan for us to get comfort, and God's plan was for us to experience sacrifice for the kingdom of heaven. And so we've created a whole thing where we have this storyline going that we're good because, I go to church. I love Jesus. And I've got a routine that I do every night or do every day or every time I eat or every time I do this. And Paul is saying, whoa, hold on. Before you say that, 1 Corinthians chapter 6:13, find it back in my notes, guys. 1 Corinthians 6:13, he says, you say, food for the stomach and stomach for the food, and God will destroy them both. So the body, however, is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. This is the context that Paul said that I will not be mastered by anything. We've been looking at the physical. We've been looking at what satisfies me physically. And Paul said that's what brings mastery. When you focus on the physical, when you focus on the quick fix, when you focus on what satisfies you physically, then you will be trapped and you will be mastered by it instead of the other way around. Instead, he says, do you not know Verse 19, that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God. You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. So the plan to get disconnected, to cut something off, is only half the plan. If you only do half the plan, then you really, really miss it, Paul is saying to the church at Ephesus. There has to be a newness. There has to be a renewal, not just a clinical cut, but constant connection. Constant connection. There was a study done by a best-selling author who wrote Chasing the Scream. I don't recommend the book. I don't recommend the author. But he made some points that were really profound and true to me. All truth is God's truth, amen? Just because somebody from the world taps into it, okay, whatever, it's God's truth. But Johann Hari said this, that he quotes actually a study. Let me back up a minute. He quotes a study, and this is what he says: the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. But this is where it comes from. Say, well, that doesn't make any sense, because we've been teaching forever. Just get sober, just get sober, just get clean. I've been clean how many days, how many weeks, how many months, how many years? I'm going to celebrate the fact that I'm clean, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing, but that's only half the equation. Because the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is actually connection, and it turns out that addiction is much more about connection than it is the substance that we're addicted to. Here's a study that he quotes. So forever ago, the early 20th century, there was a study done with rats. I don't know why rats are always the victim, but they are, okay? Poor rats. We should start a new foundation for them or something, GoFundMe for the rats. But so the rats got together. They didn't. They were collected. They were enslaved, but they participated unwillingly or maybe unknowingly, depending on what you think rats are like. And they went through this thing, and they put on one side of a cage, they put all these rats in these tiny little cages. You can go online and look at this study and actually see the little cages. They're tiny little cages, and on one side was, the little drip things that they suck on and the little water comes out. On one side was water. The other side was water laced with heroin. So every single time, in every single study, it showed a chemical dependency. That proved as to why we need to fight the war on drugs. Because the rats said, I'll take the heroin. And they overdosed every single time. They couldn't stop themselves. They had no self-control. And eventually, that chemical dependency, they didn't care about the water. They just wanted more of this. So that proved chemical dependency. And when the chemical dependency got proven, then we started the war on drugs. This is your brain on drugs. And that fried egg right there. There it is. That began the war. So we began this war against something. So we started and Hari talks about the fact that we began to sing songs of war, so to speak, to the culture and say, warring against this, and this is going to harm you, and stay away from this, and you'll get addicted. If you just take a few drops, you don't even know, like take one drop, you're addicted, and some of us had parents, who really freaked out about that, and they found out I was sick of alcohol. It's like, oh, my son is an alcoholic. Well, they had this one time. It was just one time. No, but now you're addicted. And the reason those thoughts came, because for good reasons, because, we had the Vietnam War, and that was a human rat experiment, essentially. Because 95% of those soldiers became addicted to heroin. But how did that happen? Well, I don't know. You start throwing bullets at your head, and maybe you're a little stressed out about it. But it's the same reason it happened to the rats. Because they just had a cage. Because a lot of years later, a guy by the name of Bruce Alexander actually built a different cage. And Bruce Alexander in the 70s came out with a study, and he said that let's try this again. But this time, let's have a drink laced with heroin and water, but let's change what happens in the cage. Let's put other rats in there, first of all. Not just solitary confinement. Let's actually have other rats in there. And let's give the rats something to do. And he basically built all the fun things that are fun if you're a rat, I guess, okay? And they built like a rat park, it was better than King's Dominion. It was just like, had all the tunnels and all the sawdust to burrow in and all the fun things. And they were like, look at me on the hoop. I'm not. And they were like, Sam, you're not moving anywhere. But yeah, it's awesome. You got to try this thing. It's great. And they would just spin. And it was an incredible ride. And they started having fun. They started connecting with other rats and started connecting to fun. And what they realized, this truth is that addiction was not about the substance. It was about connection. Because none of the rats overdosed. So now we're learning that the war on drugs and the war songs that we were singing should have been love songs. They should have been connection songs. Because what an addict doesn't need is to hear they're an addict. An addict needs to hear that they're loved. An addict doesn't need you to tell them they're addicted. They probably already know they're addicted. Now, I know there's a confession and admission. If that doesn't happen, then they just go, okay, thanks for loving me, but this isn't changing me. I totally get that. That's scriptural. That's biblical, that we confess our sins. If we don't own it, we won't be free from it. But along the way, how we get people to confess their sins is exactly the same way we get them to confess their addiction, which is showing them the love of Christ and what God created them for, the hole that they've been missing their whole lives, that there was a God that loved you so much that he sent his only son. And you could look at any one of your kids and say, no way, no how, I would never do that, but Jesus did it. And what God created them for was that connection. And we need to be coming along and not running away from the addicts, but running towards them. And not setting up more and more structure to get everyone away from them, but teach us how to connect with them. That's why I want to go deeper in that tomorrow night. And how do we connect? How do we come alongside? Because the last thing we want to do is just say, you're an addict, stay away. We want to say, you're an addict, but I love you. Or we want to say, this is what you've been missing, because connection is the point. You can be as surgical as you want or clinical as you want about the cup, because it's ridiculous to just hack it off, and that's so crazy, that's insane. We do want to cut, but Paul talked about a more clinical approach to cutting it. He said that you should choose the thing that you are becoming dependent on instead of God and replace it with what God desires for you. Build new patterns, renew your mind, Romans 12 says, our theme verse for our kids camp coming back. That we would not be conformed to the things of this world, but we would be transformed by the renewing of your what? Cutting off is just half the story. Our other part of the plan has to be connection. There's another study that was done by Vincent Faludi out in California. The original study was on obesity. And he got together some people who were struggling, and young people actually who were struggling with obesity. And there was a client who entered the study who was like 450 pounds, came into the study and was the poster child for the study. They did all the things right. They cut out all the right things. They even replaced with good behavior and good eating patterns, and then lost 300 pounds. And so this model child, down the road, he went back and followed up with everyone in the original study and found that she had put all the weight back on. So got with her and said, how did this happen? I don't know, I'm sorry, and the shame, and the shame, and the shame. And so then he said, well, let me ask you, when did this start? Tell me about the days the wheels came off the bus, so to speak. And so she talked about a time that she was actually in a bar and a man approached her, and never happened to her before. A man approached her and began to talk with her, and not in a horrible way, but in an attraction way, and trying to get relational and trying to build a relationship and hoping it goes somewhere. And she just freaked out. So Dr. Faludi said, well, tell me about the first time you started eating, and the first time. Well, I think really when it got out of control was when I was 11 years old, and my grandfather began to touch me inappropriately. So the light bulb went on. he went, wow, I've been asking the wrong question. I've been asking what's wrong with you. I should have been asking what happened to you. And he drew a connection between childhood trauma and obesity. And then he said to the CDC, what if we did this with every single chemical or any kind of dependence, any kind of addiction, anything at all? What if we did the same study? Every time somebody comes in, I want you to give them questionnaires, part A and part B. Part A said this: did you have a bad thing happen to you in your childhood? And described a whole bunch of different trauma that happened in their childhood. And then as an adult, have you experienced any of the following? Obesity, addiction, depression, anxiety. And the answer was, if the answer was yes to part one, to even one thing, they were 2 to 4 times more likely to be depressed or have anxiety or have an addiction. If 6 traumatic events happened in a childhood, it would multiply over 3,000 times more likely to attempt suicide. 4,600 more times likely to have an addiction. So then he just began to ask a question. He said, tell me about this. And 60% of the participants, after they filling out the survey, Dr. Faludi would just come and ask and say, hey, I'm really sorry that happened to you. I see some things happened in your childhood. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That never should have happened to you. That wasn't the way you were designed, and I hate that for you. Would you like to talk about it? 60% of them talked about it for 5 minutes. And just in this case study, he saw a rapid decrease in every single one of their symptoms for talking about it once. Say, we're on to something. Let's connect them. Let's get them connected. Let's get them processing this. Let's process not what's wrong with them, but what happened to them. Because trauma associated to anyone brings 3,000 to 4,000 times more results of horrible, negative connection to the wrong thing. Looking for a solution to your life, looking for some kind of a quick fix, a false fix to somehow grant me a comfort, to give me a moment of peace, to survive. And all we were looking for survival, but while we were looking for survival, Jesus had a plan, and the plan happened 2,000 years ago before you ever struggled looking for your survival or looking for your false fix. Jesus said, I'm going to go. I'm going to be Emmanuel, God with us. I will enter this world of addiction. I will enter this chaos. I will enter this brokenness, and I will be broken once and for all. He said, consider Jesus, who took upon himself the cross and died in complete and total shame. We don't want to talk about our addiction, but Jesus already took all of the shame on him, knowing that there would be a moment when you just needed to connect to him. Hey, amen. If I had time to preach it, here's what I'd preach last. That a new fix and a new plan lead to a new life. They lead to a new life. Listen to what John chapter 10 says. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life, and that they may have it more abundantly. Jesus wanted you to be fulfilled. He wanted you to be filled. He designed you to be filled. This is why people ask the question. Paul talked about it to the church at Rome. This is why people ask the question from the time they were born. Where is God? Who is God? How can I connect to God? You were born with that thought. You were born with an inclination towards finding the ultimate solution and the ultimate filling. Listen to the way he says it. Jesus in his own words in Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Why? For they will be filled. He always had a plan for your filling. The problem is we just took and created our own plan. And this morning, Jesus is coming to you no matter what you're struggling with and saying, hey, I'm asking you and inviting into the plan that I created, the one that will fill you forever. If you drink from this, you will never thirst again. If you eat the bread of my word, you will never go hungry again. And it isn't a problem. Listen, we have addiction in our lives. We have connection to the wrong things. Jesus isn't saying that just give it up. Jesus is saying, let me be the one who fills you. Let me be the one who brings you fulfillment. I am the one. I'm the one. There's no one else who came and died for you. That drug isn't going to sacrifice for you. Those people who you're hanging with aren't going to sacrifice for you. They're not going to come alongside of you. We've traded true friends for followers. In the most connected society that has ever existed, in a moment, I can connect with the world in just one click, and I'm addicted to it. I just want instant feedback. The problem is, we fixated on the wrong thing, but if we change the fix and fix our eyes on Jesus, and we change our plan, and we cut off the right things, the things that we've connected to, and we reconnect with who Jesus planned, then not only will we have a new fix, not only will we have a new plan, we will have a new life, the one that Jesus designed for you. Would you stand with me in prayer? God, thank you that your word is powerful and it's true. But God, thank you for connecting to me. Forgive me for so many times that I have built my foundation on the things of this world. Lord, forgive me for the times that I have trusted in other substances, other foods, other systems, other patterns, other drugs, other ways to somehow connect with things that help me for a moment. Forgive me, Jesus, for not fixing my eyes on you, the author and finisher of our faith. God, I want right now in this moment to relinquish control. I want to relinquish control. And I no longer want to be the author and finisher of my fix. I want you to be the author and finisher, the one who died for me. And I'll do whatever it takes. Aren't you tired of building your foundation? Other things? The psalmist said this, I trust in him and him alone. Would you make that your prayer right now? And build your firm foundation on the only thing that can fill you, the love of Christ. God, we give you this moment. Grow it in our hearts, oh God. Let us experience who you truly are and be filled with you today. In Jesus' name, amen.